The steam hissed violently from the iron, a white cloud rising and vanishing into the cool air of the penthouse laundry room. Outside, the gray Manhattan rain relentlessly battered the floor-to-ceiling windows, blurring the city lights into smudged watercolors. I pressed the button again. Hiss. If my employees at the studio could see me now, they would probably faint. Eleanor Vance, the woman who fired a lead architect last week because his vision for a lobby in Aspen lacked soul, was currently standing barefoot on cold marble, steaming the wrinkles out of a 32-year-old man's silk shirt. A shirt I bought, with a card I pay off, for a man who is currently lying on the living room sofa, probably researching how to look busy on his tablet. "Elle, honey?" Julian's voice drifted in from the hallway, smooth and practiced. "Have you seen my navy blazer, the one with the gold buttons? I have that huge meeting with the investors in an hour." I paused, the heavy iron hovering over the fabric. There were no investors. I knew that. The only meeting Julian had was with a cup of overpriced coffee and a group of other men who wore loafers without socks and talked about cryptocurrency as if they understood it. "It's on the rack, Julian," I called out. My voice was steady, calm, the voice of a woman who had negotiated contracts worth more than the GDP of a small island nation. "Right where I left it after I cleaned the truffle oil stain you made last week." "You're an angel," he shouted back. "Truly, I don't know what I'd do without you." "You would starve," I thought, a small, dry smile touching my lips. "Or you would shrink in the wash." I remembered the first time I let him do laundry. He had thrown my vintage cashmere collection in with his gym socks and set the machine to sanitize. I came home to find $3,000 worth of sweaters that would now fit a well-dressed chihuahua. He had looked at me with those wide puppy dog eyes, holding up a shrunken cardigan like a tragic offering. "I just wanted to help," he had said. And I had melted. I had forgiven him. I was such a fool back then. I picked up his favorite dress shirt, a light blue Italian cotton. As I smoothed the collar, my thumb brushed against the stitching. It was perfect. Too perfect. I had spent my life examining details. I knew the difference between a seam that holds and a seam that is about to burst, just like us. 6 months ago, I wouldn't have noticed the weight of this shirt. I would have felt pride. "Look at my handsome husband," I would have thought. But today, the fabric felt heavy. It felt like a costume I was preparing for an actor who had forgotten his lines but refused to leave the stage. I folded the sleeve, aligning the cuff perfectly with the shoulder. Square. Sharp. Precise. I wasn't just folding laundry today, I was folding away my denial. He popped his head into the room. He looked dashing, I had to admit. That jawline could sell ice to an Eskimo. "Do I look like a man who is about to close a deal?" I looked at him. Really looked at him. I saw the slight panic in his eyes, the way he constantly checked his reflection in the glass door of the washing machine. "You look?" I paused, smoothing a non-existent crease on the ironing board. "You look exactly like the man I think you are, Julian." He beamed, missing the subtext entirely. "Thanks, babe. Don't wait up." He grabbed the blazer and vanished, leaving a trail of expensive cologne, my cologne, in his wake. The room fell silent again, save for the rhythmic drumming of the rain. I picked up a pair of his socks. One was missing. "Well," I whispered to the empty room, "let's see where you really go when you think I'm not looking." I didn't need a detective. I didn't need a GPS tracker. I just needed to stop pretending the emperor had clothes. I reached for the next shirt. The front door clicked shut, sealing the silence back inside the penthouse. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I turned back to the laundry basket. It was a bottomless pit, much like Julian's ambition. Next up was a gray cashmere sweater. It was soft, cloud-like, the kind of fabric that whispers money. I bought it for him last Christmas. He had worn it, looked in the mirror and said, "It makes me look authoritative." "Doesn't it, Elle? Like a man who builds skyscrapers." I almost laughed out loud in the empty room. Julian couldn't build a sandwich without instructions, let alone a skyscraper. He was currently on a CEO health kick. Every morning, he made this sludge-green juice that smelled like fresh lawn clippings and wet dog. He would drink it with a grimace telling me, "Fuel for the mind, Eleanor, high-performance machine." Yet I consistently found empty boxes of frozen pepperoni pizza buried deep in the recycling bin, hidden under the newspapers. A high-performance machine powered by processed cheese and lies. I shook the sweater out, holding it by the shoulders. But as the fabric settled, the amusement faded. My hands went cold. I remembered this sweater. He was wearing this exact gray cashmere 6 months ago. The night the air suddenly vanished from the room. It was a Tuesday. I had been standing in the kitchen, reviewing a blueprint for a hotel lobby in Chicago, when a sharp, crushing weight hit the center of my chest. It wasn't theatrical like in the movies. I didn't scream. I just dropped the glass of water I was holding. Crash! Shards of glass exploded across the floor. I fell to my knees, gasping, clutching my blouse. The pain radiated down my left arm like a line of fire. "Julian." I had wheezed. It was barely a whisper. He had walked in from the living room, wearing the sweater, holding his tablet. He saw me on the floor. He saw the shattered glass. He saw his wife, the woman who funded his entire existence, clutching her chest, unable to breathe. And he stopped. That was the moment that haunted me. He didn't drop the tablet. He didn't rush forward instantly. He stood there, 5 feet away, and he paused. For 5 seconds, I counted them in the beat of my failing heart. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In those 5 seconds, I didn't see panic in his eyes. I saw arithmetic. I saw him calculating the timeline. I saw him wondering if the will was updated. I saw him wondering if he knew where the safe combination was. It was the coldest look I had ever seen. Then the mask slipped back on. "Elle! Oh my God, Elle!" He dropped the tablet and rushed over, playing the role of the terrified husband perfectly. He called 911. He held my hand in the ambulance, stroking my hair, telling the paramedics, "Please save her. She's my everything." But I knew. I survived. It was just severe angina, stress-induced. But the marriage died on that kitchen floor, right next to the broken glass. I just hadn't admitted it until now. I looked down at the gray sweater in my hands. It felt heavy, soaked in that memory. I didn't throw it across the room. I didn't take scissors to it. I was Eleanor Vance. I didn't do tantrums. Instead, I laid it face down on the ironing board. I folded the left sleeve across the back, then the right. I smoothed it out, gentle and precise. 5 seconds, Julian, I whispered to the empty air. That's all it took for you to show me who you are. I placed the folded sweater on the finished pile. It looked neat, innocent, just a piece of clothing. But now, I was done folding the past. It was time to deal with the present. I reached into the basket and pulled out something that didn't belong to him. Or me. I held it up to the light. It was a sock. But not just any sock. It was neon green, an aggressive, blinding shade of lime. And it was made of that cheap, scratchy polyester that feels like it could start a forest fire if you rubbed it too fast. It dangled from my manicured fingers like a radioactive caterpillar that had invaded a nest of elegant swans. This didn't belong in my laundry basket. My laundry basket was a sanctuary of Egyptian cotton, linen, and muted earth tones. This object belonged to a frat boy named Gary who drank beer out of a plastic funnel, which of course was exactly who Julian really was when the curtain came down. I let out a short, dry chuckle. It was almost funny. He spent hours every morning curating his brand, the sleek suits, the leather loafers, the vocabulary he picked up from watching investment documentaries. But here, hidden in the static cling of the dryer, his true self had snagged on a towel. "You really are a mess, aren't you?" I murmured to the neon atrocity. I pictured him wearing this, probably when he went to that high-end gym he claimed to frequent. The one that I suspected was actually a dim pool hall in Queens where he met his old buddies to complain about how controlling his rich wife was. I started to instinctively look for its mate. That was my habit. That was my programming. Fix the mess, find the pair, make it whole. I rummaged through the basket, tossing aside towels and pillowcases. Then my hand stopped. Why was I looking for the other one? I stood there, freezing in the middle of the warm laundry room. For 3 years, that's exactly what I had been doing. I had been exhausting myself, trying to force a match where there wasn't one. I was trying to pair a vintage silk stocking with a cheap synthetic gym sock. And I wondered why I always felt snagged. I wondered why I always felt like the quality of my life was unraveling. It wasn't just a sock. It was the incompatibility of our souls, woven into a dollar store fabric. I looked at the lone green sock one last time. It looked pathetic, lonely, out of place. "No," I said firmly. "I'm not finding your partner today." I didn't fold it. I didn't set it aside on the lost and found shelf. I walked over to the trash bin in the corner, the one meant for dryer lint and empty detergent sheets. I dropped the neon sock into the darkness. Thud. A soft, inconsequential sound. It felt surprisingly good. Liberating, even. If only disposing of the man himself could be as simple as discarding his terrible fashion choices. But then again, maybe it could be. As if on cue, my stomach grumbled. I realized I hadn't eaten since breakfast. And judging by the silence from the living room, neither had Julian. He was probably waiting for me to emerge with a neatly pressed shirt and a suggestion for lunch. Well, he was in for a surprise. The kitchen was closed, and the service was about to get terrible. I smoothed down my own blouse, checked my reflection in the window, and prepared to deliver the coldest lunch of his life. I walked into the living room, carrying the basket of folded clothes. The only sound was a soft, rhythmic snoring. There was Julian, the global strategist, sprawled across the velvet sofa. He had a business magazine open across his face, rising and falling with each breath. His tablet lay on the floor, displaying a paused game of virtual golf. "Working hard, I see," I said, my voice cutting through the nap time. Julian jerked awake. The magazine slid off his face, revealing a red imprint on his cheek where he had been drooling on a graph about stock market trends. He sat up, wiping his mouth quickly. I wasn't sleeping. I was visualizing. It's a technique I read about, deep state alpha wave processing. "Of course," I said, setting the basket down on the coffee table. "Did the alpha waves tell you how to unload the dishwasher? Because that's still full." He blinked, looking at me as if I had just spoken ancient Greek. "Dishwasher? Babe, I'm in the middle of a mental sprint here. I can't break the flow." He stood up, stretching his arms, his shirt riding up to reveal a stomach that was definitely not getting enough gym time. "Speaking of fuel, what's for lunch?" "I'm thinking something light but protein-rich. Maybe that grilled salmon salad you make? The one with the capers?" He smiled that winning smile, the one that used to make me rush to the kitchen, eager to please. I looked at him. I looked at the kitchen. Then I walked over to the fruit bowl, picked up a single crisp red apple and polished it on my sleeve. "The kitchen is open, Julian," I said, taking a bite. Crunch. "I'm sure you can figure out the geography." His smile faltered. "Wait, you're not making lunch?" "I'm on a break," I said, chewing slowly. "Union rules." "But I have low blood sugar. You know I get cranky when my levels drop." He looked genuinely betrayed, like a toddler who had been told Santa Claus was actually just a guy in a suit. "Then I suggest you eat a grape," I replied, turning toward the window to watch the rain. I heard him shuffle into the kitchen. There was the sound of a cabinet opening, then closing. Then the refrigerator door opened. He stood there for a long time. I could practically hear his brain trying to process the raw ingredients. To Julian, a refrigerator wasn't a source of food, it was a mystery box that required a wife to unlock. His voice whined from the kitchen. "Where do we keep the bread? The slices?" "In the bread box, Julian, the box that says bread on it." Right? A pause. "Do we have any mayo? Or do I have to make it?" I suppressed a laugh. The idea of Julian making mayonnaise from scratch was funnier than any sitcom. "It's in the door, Julian, behind the mustard." I heard jars clinking, a muttered curse word, and then the sound of something plastic hitting the floor. I didn't turn around. I didn't rush to help. I just took another bite of my apple. It tasted sweeter than usual. "You're doing great, honey," I called out, my voice dripping with false encouragement. Just visualize the sandwich. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't the one feeding the parasite. Let him hunt for his own crumbs. Julian emerged from the kitchen looking triumphant, holding a plate like it was a holy relic. "Lunch is served," he announced, placing it on the coffee table. I looked down. It was technically a sandwich, if a sandwich had been involved in a tragic traffic accident. The bread was torn, the lettuce was hanging out like a tired tongue, and there was enough mayonnaise to drown a small village. "I made it with love," he said, flashing that boyish grin. "And extra mayo, just how I like it." "Thank you, Julian," I said, careful not to touch it. "It looks complex." He sat down next to me, a little too close. I could smell the nervousness radiating off him, mixing with the scent of the mustard he'd spilled on his shirt. He didn't pick up his own sandwich. Instead, he reached under the sofa cushion and pulled out a thick blue folder. Ah, here it comes. The main course. Since we're sitting down, he started, his voice dropping to that serious, I'm taking care of business tone. I was thinking about your future, our future. You know, with your health scare last year. He let the sentence hang, trying to look concerned. He was referencing the angina attack. The 5-second pause. What about it? I asked, leaning back. Well, I had my lawyer, a friend who knows about these things, draw up some updated paperwork. Just standard protection stuff. In case you get tired or confused, it just lets me handle the boring bills so you can relax. He slid the folder across the table, pushing aside the leaking sandwich. He clicked a pen and held it out to me. Just need a scribble on the bottom tab, the one marked with the sticky note. I looked at the document. To an untrained eye, it looked like gibberish. To me, a woman who had read construction contracts for 30 years, the words jumped out in neon lights. Durable power of attorney. Full asset control. He wasn't just asking to pay the bills, he was asking for the keys to the kingdom. I looked at his face. He was trying so hard to look casual, but a bead of sweat was trickling down his temple. I decided to give him exactly what he expected. Oh, Julian, I sighed, putting a hand to my forehead. You're so thoughtful. But you know, without my reading glasses, these letters look like ants marching in a line. You don't need to read it, Elle. It's boilerplate. Standard stuff, he urged, wiggling the pen. I know, but... I took the pen, my hand trembled dramatically. I lowered the pen toward the paper. Julian held his breath, his eyes widened. He was mentally spending the money already. Just as the tip touched the paper, I jerked my hand. Splat. A glob of mayonnaise from the sandwich on the table accidentally flew off my finger and landed smack in the middle of the signature line. A greasy, white translucent stain began to spread rapidly across the legal document. Oh no, I gasped, covering my mouth. Look at what I did! I'm so clumsy today, it must be the weather. Julian stared at the ruined document. His face went through 5 stages of grief in 3 seconds. His jaw worked silently. It's okay, he choked out, his voice high and tight. I can print another one. Do we have a printer? I asked innocently. I thought you sold it because it disrupted your feng shui? He closed his eyes. He looked like he was about to scream. Right, I did. I'll have to go to the copy shop. You do that, honey, I said, patting his knee. And maybe while you're out, get yourself a sandwich. This one seems to be leaking. He grabbed the folder and stormed off toward the bedroom to get his coat. I picked up a napkin and wiped the mayonnaise off my finger. My hand was perfectly steady. Nice try, amateur, I whispered. The front door slammed shut and the apartment breathed a sigh of relief. Julian was gone, racing to the copy shop to reprint his ticket to my fortune. I didn't go back to the laundry immediately. Instead, I walked down the hall to the home office. Julian had insisted on this room. He claimed he needed a sanctuary for high-level thinking. I pushed the door open. The air inside was stale, smelling faintly of corn chips and old ambition. The desk, a beautiful mahogany piece I had designed myself, was cluttered with energy drink cans and a headset. The computer screen was asleep, but the mousepad featured a cartoon character with questionable proportions. So much for high-level thinking. I walked around the desk, feeling like an archaeologist in the ruins of a very dull civilization. In the top drawer, buried under a pile of unpaid parking tickets and loose change, I found it. A black leather notebook. It looked serious, important. He carried it everywhere, often tapping it thoughtfully during dinner conversations. I opened it, expecting maybe gambling debts or a list of passwords. Instead, I found a script. Page 1. Written in his messy, childish scrawl, the vulnerability angle. Mention her mother. Say, she's watching over you. Works every time. Compliment her hands. Older women like that. Keywords to use: synergy, legacy, soulmate. I flipped the page. When she gets suspicious, act hurt. Gaslight? Look up definition. If she asks about money, get angry about trust. I stared at the pages. My hands weren't shaking. In fact, a bubble of laughter was rising in my throat. It was a manual. A How to Con a Rich Wife for Dummies guide. And the worst part? It was poorly written. He had misspelled soulmate as soulmate, like a fish. For 3 years I thought I was dealing with a charming, manipulative genius. I thought I was losing my mind. But I wasn't fighting a mastermind. I was just following a bad script written by a man who couldn't even spell the emotions he was faking. I felt the last knot of tension in my chest loosen. The fear was gone. You can't be afraid of a clown once you see him applying his makeup. I closed the notebook. I didn't tear it up. I didn't burn it. It was too valuable. It was my closure. I placed it gently on top of his messy desk, right next to a bag of gummy bears. I wanted him to find it later. I wanted him to know that I knew. Synergy, I whispered, chuckling to myself. You want synergy, Julian? I'll give you synergy. I turned and walked out of the room. The laundry was still waiting. But now, the folding wasn't a chore. It was a countdown. I checked my watch. He would be back in 20 minutes with the new papers. That was plenty of time to pack the most important bag of his life. I walked into the master closet. It was the size of a small apartment lined with cedar and filled with the scent of lavender sachets. I pulled down Julian's suitcase. It was a sturdy, wheeled carry-on. Not too big, just enough for the essentials. I wasn't throwing his clothes out the window. That's what dramatic women in movies do. I was a designer. I believed in curation. And I was about to curate his departure collection. I started pulling things off the hangers. But instead of folding them with the Vance fold, my signature method involving tissue paper and perfect creases, I used a new technique I called the get out. I grabbed a handful of his t-shirts and rolled them into tight, angry burritos. Stuff. Shove. Zip. Then I opened his bottom drawer to get his socks, and I found something that made me snort with laughter. Hidden beneath his cashmere scarves was a plastic grocery bag. Inside were hundreds, literally hundreds, of those tiny, travel-size shampoo and conditioner bottles. I picked one up. It was from the luxury resort we stayed at in Aspen last winter. And here was one from Paris. And another from Tokyo. We were multimillionaires. We could buy a shampoo factory if we wanted to. Yet here was Julian, the international tycoon, hoarding free mini soaps like a squirrel preparing for a hygiene apocalypse. Oh, Julian, I chuckled, shaking my head. You really never left the hustle, did you? It was pathetic and perfect. I grabbed the entire bag of stolen toiletries and dumped it into the suitcase. Clatter, clatter, clatter. There, I said. A starter kit for your new life. Hygiene is important when you're couch surfing. Next, I went back to the laundry basket in the other room and retrieved the neon green sock. The radioactive caterpillar. I placed it gently right on top of the pile of clothes, like a garnish on a terrible meal. I didn't pack his silk shirts. I didn't pack the Italian blazer. I packed the polyester tracksuits, the faded jeans, and the t-shirts with funny slogans that he used to wear before I dressed him. I was returning him to his factory settings. I zipped the suitcase shut. It bulged slightly, thanks to the mountain of mini shampoos. I wheeled it out to the living room and stood it right next to the front door. It stood there like a sentinel. A silent announcement. Then I went to the kitchen. I put the kettle on. I needed a cup of tea. Earl Grey. Hot. I checked the time. The elevator dinged down the hall. Showtime. The front door flew open with dramatic flair. Julian burst in, chest heaving, clutching a crisp new blue folder against his chest like a shield. He looked like a damp golden retriever that had just successfully retrieved a tennis ball. I got it, he panted, kicking the door shut behind him. The copy machine was jammed, and the guy behind the counter was moving at the speed of a glacier, but I made it happen, for us, for our peace of mind. He wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, careful not to smudge the precious documents. He marched toward the living room, eyes locked on the pen sitting on the table. Then he stopped dead. He saw the suitcase standing by the door. He blinked, he looked at the suitcase, then he looked at me, sitting in the armchair with my cup of tea, then back at the suitcase. A slow, wide grin spread across his face, the kind of grin that usually preceded a request for a new sports car. "Elle," he gasped, his voice dropping to a whisper of awe. You sly fox." "Am I?" I asked, blowing gently on my tea. "You packed for us. That's what the laundry was for." He clapped his hands together. "Is it a surprise trip? Did you book that resort on the coast?" "Oh, baby, you shouldn't have. Although I admit, I've been needing some sun. My vitamin D is critically low." He walked over to the suitcase and patted it affectionately. "Wait," he frowned, poking the bulging side. "It's a bit small for both of us. Did you pack the other bags already? I hope you packed my silk robe, the one that makes me look like a feudal lord." I took a sip of Earl Grey. The bergamot was soothing. That bag isn't for us, Julian, I said softly. He looked confused. It's not? Is it just for you? Are you going on a retreat? Panic flickered in his eyes for a split second. Panic that his bank account was leaving the building. No. I shook my head. It's for the person in this room who needs to find a new place to sleep tonight. He laughed, a nervous, high-pitched chuckle. You're funny today, Elle. Your humor is so dry, like this weather. He waved the folder. Anyway, let's just sign this quickly so we can get to the surprise. The ink is still warm. He sat down opposite me, pushing the folder under my nose. He offered the pen with a trembling hand. Just right there, next to the sticky note. No mayonnaise this time, promise? He winked. I set my teacup down on the saucer with a delicate clink. I found your notebook, Gary, I said. The name hung in the air like a thunderclap. His smile froze. It didn't fade, it just solidified, like cheap plastic hardening. Gary? He squeaked. Who's Gary? Is that the gardener? The notebook, I repeated, ignoring his deflection. The one where you spelled soulmate wrong. Page 1. The vulnerability angle. He stared at me. The color drained from his face faster than water down a drain. The folder slid from his fingers and landed on the floor with a dull slap. Oh. He whispered. Yes, I nodded. Oh. For a moment, the room was so quiet, I could hear the bubbles popping in my tea. Then Julian, or Gary, or whoever he was, tried one last pivot. He laughed. It was a brittle cracking sound. The notebook? He waved his hands dismissively. Elle, honey, you looked in my private journal? That's just research. I'm writing a screenplay, a thriller, about a con artist. I was getting into character. It's called method acting. He looked at me with wide, pleading eyes. You didn't think that was real, did you? I love you. I love our life. He looked around the room, struggling to find something specific. I love this lamp. You hate that lamp, I said calmly. You told me it looked like a glowing mushroom last week. I was joking. It's a magnificent mushroom. He stepped toward me. Elle, please, put the tea down. Let's talk about the synergy of our assets again. I stood up. I didn't rush. I unfolded my limbs with the grace of a woman who owns the building, not the guest who is overstaying their welcome. The show is over, Gary. The reviews are in, and the critics say the lead actor lacks depth. I pointed to the suitcase by the door. I packed your things, all of them. The polyester tracksuits, the ripped jeans, and of course, your collection. Collection? He blinked, confused. The shampoos, I said, a small smirk playing on my lips. The hundreds of tiny bottles you stole from hotels. I packed them all. You sounded like a maraca band when I zipped the bag shut. His face flushed a deep, humiliating shade of red. Being called a con man was one thing. Being exposed as a petty thief of conditioning rinse was apparently the final straw for his ego. I have sensitive hair, he muttered, his voice dropping an octave. The suave accent was gone, replaced by a flatter, rougher tone. The real Gary. Well, now you have plenty of product for the road, I said. I suggest you leave before I call the number on the back of your research notebook. The one labeled bail bondsman. He looked at the phone on the table. Then he looked at me. He saw the steel in my eyes. He realized that the ATM was permanently out of order. His posture slumped. The invisible strings holding up his puppet limbs were cut. He walked to the door and grabbed the handle of the suitcase. He paused, looking back at me. I thought he might apologize. I thought he might say something profound. Can I have cash for a cab? He asked. It's raining. I laughed, a genuine hearty laugh that shook my shoulders. Gary, I said, shaking my head. You have legs. Walk. It builds character. He scowled, opened the door, and dragged his rattling suitcase out into the hallway. I walked over and closed the door. Click. The deadbolt slid into place. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The apartment was quiet. But for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt spacious, like a room that had finally been decluttered of bulky, mismatched furniture. I walked back to the living room. The lunch Julian had made was still sitting on the coffee table. The bread had turned soggy from the excessive mayonnaise, curling at the edges like a dying leaf. I picked up the plate. I didn't feel sad. I felt efficient. I walked to the kitchen and scraped the sad sandwich into the garbage disposal. Whir, crunch, gone. And that, I said to the sink, concludes the catering for this pity party. Something bumped gently into my ankle. I looked down. It was the little round robot vacuum, humming softly as it navigated the kitchen tiles. "Hello there," I said, crouching down to pat its smooth plastic shell. "You know, you're a much better roommate. You actually clean up the mess, you don't talk about cryptocurrency, and you charge your own battery." The robot beeped cheerfully and spun in a circle as if agreeing with my assessment. I made myself a fresh cup of tea, this time exactly how I liked it, without Julian hovering around asking if we could afford a private jet yet. I took the tea into my studio. The rain had stopped. The clouds over the city were breaking apart, revealing streaks of deep, twilight blue. I sat at my drafting table. For months, this table had been covered in Julian's bills and legal notices. Now it was just a clean, white surface, a blank canvas. I picked up a pencil. The graphite felt familiar and grounding in my hand. I didn't draw a hotel lobby or a penthouse suite. I drew a simple room. It had large windows, comfortable chairs, and no heavy curtains to block the light. I sketched a single figure standing by the window, looking out. She looked strong. She looked at peace. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text from my assistant asking about the morning meeting. "Everything okay, boss?" I smiled and typed back, "Better than okay. The renovation is complete." I walked back to the laundry room one last time to turn off the lights. The basket was empty. The clothes were put away. In the closet, there was a gap in the row of hangers where Julian's suits used to be. A younger, more insecure version of me would have rushed to fill that gap, terrified of the empty space. But tonight, I ran my hand along the empty wooden hanger. It swung gently back and forth. It wasn't an empty space. It was room to breathe. I turned off the light, leaving the laundry room in darkness, and walked into the rest of my life. 6 months later, spring had finally come to Manhattan. The cold, gray rain that had battered the windows that fateful afternoon was gone, replaced by a warm, golden sunlight that spilled across the penthouse floor like honey. I stood on the balcony, shaking out a tablecloth. It was a bright, cheerful yellow, a color I hadn't used in years because Julian said it clashed with his minimalist vibe. Today, it looked like sunshine woven into fabric. Tonight, I was hosting a dinner party. Not for investors or clients, but for old friends. People who had known me before the empire, before the money, and certainly before the mistake named Gary. There would be laughter that didn't sound forced. There would be wine that was actually tasted, not just bragged about. And most importantly, there would be no neon socks hidden in the laundry. I walked back inside, smoothing the tablecloth over the dining table. My hands moved with the same precision as always, but the tension was gone. My shoulders felt light, unburdened by the weight of a grown man's ego. The robot vacuum, my loyal, silent companion, hummed affectionately from the corner. I smiled at it. "Don't worry," I whispered. "No crumbs for you yet." I paused and looked toward the hallway. The door to the laundry room was ajar. For a long time, I avoided that room. It reminded me of the deception. But now, as the afternoon light filtered in, hitting the marble countertop, I realized that room wasn't a place of betrayal. It was a place of awakening. It was where I found my voice, by choosing not to use it. I picked up a napkin, folding it into a crisp, perfect square. I thought about how long I had stayed quiet, enduring the small indignities, the forgotten birthdays, the calculated pauses during my heart attack. I looked directly into the reflection in the window. The woman staring back was older, yes, but her eyes were clear. That wasn't the first time I chose silence. The first sign had already appeared while I was doing laundry, and thank God, I finally listened to what the silence was trying to tell me. The doorbell rang. It was time to let the warmth in.